Washington, the USA Federal Aviation Administration said on Thursday it will allow airlines to expand the use of portable electronic devices in flight to include smartphones, tablets, and e-readers, ending a long-standing ban. Most commercial airlines can tolerate radio interference from portable electronic devices. FAA Administrator Michael Hurta said at a news conference at Reagan National Airport near Washington, D.C. It's safe to read downloaded materials like e-books, calendars, and to play games. These activities are expected to be permanent during all phases of flight, including takeoff and landing, on the vast majority of U.S. flights, he said. However, passengers will be able to connect with an airline's Wi-Fi network and can be used with Bluetooth accessories such as wireless mouse and headphones. As a practical matter, cell phones should be kept in airline mode during flight, he said. Without this setting, cell phones would continue to search vainly for a signal while aloft, draining batteries. Hurta said that the guidance applies to U.S. airlines throughout their domestic and international routes. The next step is for airlines to submit plans for implementation after testing to make sure aircraft can tolerate this kind of radio interference. Hurta said he sought update guidance on the matter, since the current policy was put in place about 50 years ago. In some cases of extremely low visibility, for perhaps 1% of all U.S. flights, some landing systems may not be able to tolerate radio interference, and in those cases, passengers should follow the advice of flight crews, he said. Within an hour of Hurta's announcement, Delta Airlines said its customers would be allowed to take advantage of the new policy as soon as Friday, pending FAA approval of its plan. All Delta aircraft have been tested to make sure they can tolerate passengers' operation of personal electronic device, Delta said in a statement. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, which contributed to the FAA plan that made the recommendation, approved the decision as it pushed for uniform technical, operational, and training standard, will allow for the safe managed expansion of PED used by passengers. The U.S. Travel Association, an industry group, phrased the move as a common-sense, win-win policy. Okay, then put on to the next news. Cards completed right-to-left pitch method. Boston, sometime between Shane Victoria's base cleaning double and Matt Carpenter's bunged rundown at first base. The St. Louis Cardinals realized this wasn't going to be their night. Too much fatigue, too much terrific pitching from the Boston Red Sox, and too much of David Ortiz's blistering bat. Right now, it sucks to get here and lose. Shortstop Daniel Descalso said after St. Louis lost 6-1 when would Wednesday to drop the World Series 4-2. We did a lot of good things this year, but right now it's tough to think about that. The Cardinals simply didn't have an answer for Ortiz. When they pitched to him early in the series, Ortiz got on bat constantly, and when they tried walking him in Game 6, his teammates picked up the slack. He is as hot as anyone you are going to see this time of year, said St. Louis manager Mike Matheny. We tried to pitch around him at times. They got big hits in big situations. With the season on the line, St. Louis went with rookie hurler Michael Wacha as their starter Wednesday. Wacha lasted 3 and 32 innings and surrendered 4 runs on 6 hits. This kid has been absolutely fascinating, McLean said of Wacha. We are not here if he doesn't do what he's done for us for the postseason. Matheny said he couldn't be more proud of his charge. There are some frustrated guys in there, but overall, you can't ask us to go about any better than our guys did. How they carried themselves, how they competed. But we did have a couple of games that we just didn't look like ourselves offensively. St. Louis found itself in this same position back in 2011, but wilted to win Game 6 and 7. However, those games were played at Busch Stadium. The Cardinals were taking aim at their second World Series titles in 3 years. They beat Boston in World Series in 1946 and 1967. It stinks to get this far and lose, said pitcher Jason Motti. But a lot of these guys came up and showed what they're capable of. The strangest moment of Wednesday's game for the Cardinals was when second baseman Carpenter and pitcher Kevin Segura botched a routine rundown on Boston's Jacob Ellsbury in the 5th inning. Ellsbury appeared to be caught off the bag in no man's land, but he raced past the pair and safely made it back to the first base. Carpenter was slapped with an arrow on the play, said Matheny. I told them to hold their head high. They have nothing to be ashamed of. We all know that we could come out and play a better game than what we did here. But we did a whole lot more than anybody gave us credit for or expected us to do. There's a lot of things that they can look on in a negative way, but this isn't the time for it. Okay, move on to the next news. ObamaCare will force some people to change plans. That's a good thing. President Barack Obama has related variation of the same message many times since first trying to sell the Affordable Care Act to the American public in 2009. If you like your plan, you can keep it. That isn't strictly true. Sure, the vast majority of people probably won't have switch plans, since they get health insurance through their employers or the government. But it's a different story for many of the roughly 15 million people who purchase individual health insurance plans through the private market. Of those people, two groups will be able to keep their coverage. Those with plans that offer ObamaCare's 10 essential benefits, and those with plans that have been made exempted or grandfathered. Plans can't be grandfathered if significant changes are made to them, such as if the coal plate climbs by more than $5. Those strict standards have resulted in only about 36% of people keeping their individual plans from 2010. Ultimately, it will result in about 7 million people being forced to switch to more expensive plans. Republicans have been warning America about this scenario since 2009 and haven't been shy about remaining the press about it. For the mainstream media, this mattered to them now because they feel like they were lied to. That's why it's caught on. Christine Kukahoushi, press secretary for the Republican National Committee, told Politico, "The White House made it out like we were the ones crying wolf. Now it turns out they're the ones who were wrong." At best, the president was, as fact-check.org put it, oversimplified and overpromising on ObamaCare when he told people they could keep their plans. At worst, he was lying to the American people. In the end, however, forcing people to switch plans is probably a good thing. Pre-ObamaCare individual health plans often skimped on or even executed altogether. Some pretty basic things, including prescription drug coverage, mental health service, material care, and preventative service. ObamaCare also stopped insurers from putting limits on annual and lifetime spending. In other words, no wonder those old plans were so cheap. The biggest issue is hospital visit. In 2011, the United States led to the developed world in hospital charges, with the average staying cost $15,000. Many of the pre-ObamaCare individual plans shouldn't even be called insurance coverage because their coverage is too spare to insure against financial ruin, writes the Washington Post Shara Cliff. Times Kate Pickett backs up that assertion with a few disconcerting figures. In 2007, 60% of personal bankruptcies were related to medical bills, and about 3/4 of those cases involved people who already had health insurance, just really plumbing insurance. And white Republicans might sound outraged over the president's broken promise. They retreated, endorsed proposal that would take insurance away from many more Americans. ObamaCare will at least force people into better plans. Some people will pay more for these politics. Some will pay less, but everybody will be getting coverage that includes an array of essential benefits, limits out-of-pocket spending, and can never be taken away or limited because the policyholder gets sick. In other words, everybody ends up with comprehensive, stable insurance. It may not be the policy he or she has today, but the vast majority of people with non-group market don't keep the same policy. For more than 2 years anyway. Of course, conservatives would argue that it isn't the government's role to force consumer to buy anything, even if it's better for them. But it's hard to argue that the bare-bones plans of old did anything more than provide peace of mind. If Americans can't sign on to healthcare.gov and get affordable replacements for their previous plans, not to mention some helpful tax credits, this is all moot. But while the president didn't help himself by glossing over the truth, Americans might eventually be glad they were dropped from their old plans. Cold killer Breivik said sorry to mother for ruining her life. OSLO, Norwegian mass killer Anders Behring Breivik, who refused to show remorse for killing 77 people in 2011. Hugged his mother and apologized for ruining her life before she died of cancer this year. According to a new biography, the mother, based on hours of conversations with Winchi Behring Breivik by journalist Marty Christensen and published on Thursday, says she once described herself as the world's saddest mother, who both hated and loved her son. She had no inkling that he was planning the attack on July 22, 2011, cooking him a dinner of spaghetti that got cold as she waited in vain for his return and watched the news of bombings and shootings by an unknown killer. She broke down in tears when the police came to her house that night to say Anders Breivik was to blame for the massacre. A bomb in Oslo that killed 8 and a shooting rampage on a nearby island that killed 69. Many of them were teenagers. Breivik, a right-wing anti-Islamic fanatic now aged 34, is serving Norway's maximum sentence in jail for the attacks, which were aimed at the Labour-led government and its young wings. A few days before Breivik died of cancer in March, she was taken by ambulance to visit her son in jail. Sorry. Glass divided on previous visit by this time. Anders Breivik was allowed out, still in handcuffs. He put his arm over and around his mother in a hug. Sorry that I have ruined your life, he whispered, the book said. By contrast, Breivik showed no compensation for his victim, saying in court that he would do it all over again if he had the chance. His father, a retired Norwegian diplomat, said after the killings that he wished Anders had never been born. I hate him, which Breivik said of her son after days spent recovering from the shock of the killings in a physiology hospital. The book says, afterwards, She felt guilt and feared that she could be killed in a revenge attack. You can never stop loving your child. It's nature. Christine Singh said of Vichy Breivik's conflicting emotions. Vichy Breivik broke off cooperation with Christine Singh just before her death, saying she did not want the book published. Publishers essentially went ahead, arguing it was in the public interest. At the release of her book, Christine Singh told reporters it was unclear what caused Andrew Breivik to become a killer. She said it was probably a blend of factors including genetic, family background, and social and political influence. Before the attack, Vichy Breivik gave her son explanation that he had become interested in hunting when she questioned why he had a rifle and a shotgun in his bedroom. A year after the killings, she considered, but did not make, an reply to say, "Dear fellow citizens, he who caused the tragedy also struck me. If I go out, someone will shoot me. I'm the saddest mother in the world today. I have been terribly sad and cried a lot. In addition to the grief of losing a son, the sense of guilt weighs heavily on me. It would be the easier to bear if he was dead. His punishment is also my punishment." NYC moves closer to tobacco buying age of 21. Young New York workers who want to light up will soon have to wait for their 21st birthday before they can buy a pack of smoke after lawmakers in the nation's most populous city voted overwhelmingly to raise the tobacco purchasing age from 18 to 21. The city council's vote Wednesday makes New York the biggest city to bar cigarette sales to 19 and 20 years old, and one of only a few places throughout the United States that have tried to stem smoking among young people by raising the purchasing age so high. The age limit also would apply to electronic vapor cigarette, and the council also approved setting a minimum $10.5 a pack price for the tobacco cigarette and stepping up enforcement on illegal tobacco sales. We know that tobacco dependence can begin very soon after a young person first tries smoking, so it's critical that we stop young people from smoking before they ever start. Mayor Michael Bloomberg said in a statement after the council votes. Bloomberg, a strong supporter of tough smoking restrictions, is expected to sign the measure. The minimum age would rise 180 days afterwards. Merchants would sell to under 21st customers would face fines starting at $1,000. Repeat violations could cost them their cigarette vending license. The city's current age limit is 18. Current age limit is 18, a federal minimum that stands in many places. The city prohibits smoking in restaurants, bars, parks, and beaches. Advocates saying higher age limits help prevent, or at least delay, young people from taking up a habit that remains the leading cause of preventable death nationwide. But some smokers say it's unfair and patronizing to tell people considered mature enough to vote and assure the military that they are not old enough to decide whether to smoke, and cigarette manufacturers who argued that the city's high cigarette tax have fueled black market sales, and suggest young adult smokers may just turn to elite sellers. This new law will only make the problem worse, said Brian D. Hedgehell, a spokesman for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, which makes Camel and other brands. Another anti-smoke initiative pushed by Bloomberg administration was shelved ahead of Wednesday's vote, focusing stores to keep cigarettes out of public view until a customer asks for them. Newsstand clerk Ellie Hassan, who sells cigarettes daily to a steady stream of customers from nearby office buildings, said he didn't know that if the new age restriction would do any good. Well, he wouldn't stop vigilantely checking identification to verify customers' age. Hassan doubted the new rules would thought determine smokers. If somebody wants to smoke, you're going to smoke, he said. Similar legislation to raise the purchasing age is expected to come to a vote in Hawaii this December. The tobacco buying age is 21st in Needham, Mass, and is supposed to rise to 21 in January in nearby Canton, Mass. The state of New Jersey also considering a similar proposal. It just makes it harder for young people to smoke, said Stephen McCrory, 25, who started smoking at 19. He added that had the age been 21 when he took up the habit, I guarantee I wouldn't be smoking today. NASA's IceBridge Readies first Antarctica-based research flights. In a few weeks, NASA's Operation IceBridge will take to the skies for another busy season of monitoring ice sheets, glaciers, and sea ice from moving. This year, the mission will be stationed in Antarctica for the first time, enabling scientists to conduct longer flights and explore areas of the icy continents that were previously out of reach. NASA's modified P-3B aircraft is scheduled to depart NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Wallops Island on November 11th and touch down at McMurdo Station in Antarctica later that week. Christy Hansen, IceBridge project manager at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Mud, told reporters in a new briefing today. Previously, Operation IceBridge research flights took off from Punta Arenas in southern Chile, but this season the mission will operate directly out of Antarctica. Once we start getting into science data collection, we will be able to collect more science data than we were based in Chile, Hansen said. Being stationed in Antarctica will also allow researchers to plan science flights that last up to 8 hours, which means the aircraft will be able to cover more ground, in some cases, enabling scientists to survey parts of Antarctica not visited on previous IceBridge missions. Operation IceBridge was one of several Antarctic missions threatened by the recent shutdown of the U.S. federal government, which lasts from October 1st through October 16th. During that time, about 80,000 federal employees were furloughed, including Michael Studinger, IceBridge lead scientist at the Goddard Space Flight Center. As a result, the status of the IceBridge mission was in limbo for some time, and despite weathering the political storm, Studinger said the government's shutdown is expected to limit the amount of research that will be conducted this season. It put our preparation on hold for more than 2 weeks, and added some other headaches that we had to resolve. Studinger said we'll collect considerable less science data than we had planned for. Chad Norton, project manager for the National Science Foundation, U.S. Antarctic Program in Central Colos, said overcoming the effects of the shutdown was challenging, but he expected federally funded research in Antarctica to bounce back. We are all systems go for a lot of the good science that's coming down, Norton said. It seems annual there's always something that pops up that's a challenge, that affects a lot of science and a lot of logics. This was a big one, and I think we got through it. And I think a lot of the scientists that NSF funds on an annual basis is going to continue. Operation IceBridge is a 6-year campaign to study how glacier, sea ice, and ice sheets at both poles change over time. The P-3B aircraft is outfitted with a suite of instruments that measures changes in ice elevation and thickness, and probe the shape of bedrock and water cavities beneath the continent ice armor. The main purpose is to measure the change in ice surface elevation over time, from year to year, Stinger said, and this allows us to estimate how much ice and ice sheet is gaining or losing, which is important because we want to understand how much this melting ice is contributing the sea level rising. NASA IceBridge mission is designed to provide critical measurements to bridge the gap between the defunct IceSat satellite and the planned IceSat-2, which is scheduled to launch in 2016. In 2011, IceBridge scientists discovered a huge crack in the Pine Island Glacier's floating ice shift. Earlier this year, the ice shift caved, dropping an iceberg larger than the city of Chicago into the Bermudan Sea.